Most Christians today feel stuck between two bad options. Either you fight for your values and get labeled a Christian nationalist, or you stay quiet and slowly watch the culture drift further from the truth. But what if those aren't the only options? If we reject Christian nationalism, what does it actually look like to follow Christ in the public square?
Well, I think it's such an important thing to ask. And, we had an episode, we were talking about James Talarico. And, we have a guest with us today who saw that episode, who's a friend of mine. He's an elder at my church, Alex Fagundo. And so, brother, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching that episode, and actually I remember a moment in which, man, it was a good episode. It was a great episode. And Iggy was beginning to say something about Christian nationalism that I felt he was getting at the very heart of it. It was like, oh my God, it's gonna get so good. And then you guys moved on. You didn't follow up on what he was saying, and I'm like, and then the conversation went somewhere else. I'm like, please bring it back, but you never brought it back.
Okay, so
we
brought Alex here as listen. If you ever have such a dissatisfaction with an episode and you leave a comment strong enough, or you reach out to one of us, you might end up over here. So thank you so much for being here. So I think we should start with some defining terms, and we need to have a
clear understanding
of what we're going to talk about, because the problem you're presenting at the very intro is so important. So
definition.
Yeah.
What is Christian nationalism?
Yeah.
Like, to define it so we're all on the same page. So
okay,
you guys are the experts. So if you guys want to start.
I like that we gave a Webster's definition of
Merriam-Webster.
Of Merriam-Webster's definition of what is it? Christian nationalism. And according to good old Merriam-Webster, Christian nationalism, where are you, Merriam-Webster? Here, it's a form of religious nationalism that focuses on promoting the Christian views of its followers in order to achieve prominence or dominance in political, cultural, and social life. Do you like that definition? Is that a good definition?
I think it's a good definition, but it doesn't get at the heart of it. Okay?
Let's get to the heart of it.
And so I think that so Mike, you and I are friends for a long time, and I think that you and I are a little bit of like poor man's philosopher, right? And we don't want to like argue against straw men. And so what I like to do is just kind of define the real good intention behind it, the good heart behind it, because I'd like to know that if I'm arguing, that I'm arguing against the best version of it, rather than like some false idea that I'm creating just so that I can break it down.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I believe like just like anything, there's good intentions. There's a good heart behind it, which is, I'll give you two. As a Christian, we receive our morals and our values from God himself, direct. So our value system comes direct from the author of everything that is good, of everything that is holy and just, of everything that is true. He's the one that gives us our values, our morals. And so if that's true, then it would make sense that these values that he's given us, they're not just good for us, but I believe that if all of society were to follow these values, it would be good for the whole.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The second one is, and I think that every Christian can get behind that, probably,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So far we're
So
tracking.
far, yeah.
Okay, so let's give an example. So a value that could be controversial in not for us, but maybe in culture, about marriage or about the right to life. You can go up and down Christian values, right, that we agree on, and I think that we would say that even if non-believers in our culture were to follow these values, all of society would benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
So the second one that I was going to bring up, just to take it a step further, is, and I think you were saying something like this, Iggy. So as a Christian, Christ is at the center of my life. Okay, so my life is like a wagon wheel where Jesus is the axle, right? And you can picture spokes coming out of my family. So Christ is at the center of my family. Christ is at the center of my finances. Christ is at the center of my career, my goals. And so if Christ is at the center of everything that makes me, then it's only natural that Christ would extend himself into how I see government and how I would like to see society being built, because there's no end to Christ's influence in my life. And so that extension would go to my political views as well. So are we tracking? I think every Christian can get behind that.
I mean, so far everything that you said, Alex, I agree. I stand behind that, and I guess that was the point that I was making on the episode, that kind of like probably you were talking before the episode started, that you were like, oh my gosh, bring it back. That is like, if Christ is everything in my life and my worldview comes from the Word of God, how can I not be a Christian nationalist? How can I stop myself from wanting all these values in the nation? Or how would that look like for me to do that without being labeled a Christian nationalist?
Okay, so I think if we're tracking with that good intent behind it so far, you might be, if you're watching this, you might be thinking, okay, what's the problem then? Like
right.
I don't see a problem. I'm with this 100%. And so in theory, there is no problem with what I just said. In theory, okay, everything that I just said, I think that we could all get behind, and it's all perfectly good in theory. The problem comes when you try to apply what I just said into an American two-party system, neither of which is a true representative of those values. Okay, now one of our two parties does a better job than the other at claiming to be the true representative of those values, while the other doesn't pander the same way to those votes, and so it doesn't try as hard. One is pandering to the Christian vote and one is not. But there's good Christian values, really, if you look at it, in both parties, and both parties have many things to be embarrassed about. Okay.
So let me ask you a question. If we would have a party that would present itself as a Christian party and would hold the values that we discussed in the intro, would it be okay to be a Christian nationalist then?
Well, you're talking about theocracy then, okay? So there is no Christian party. The only party that Jesus defines, okay, what's right in the world, right? And so the only party that Jesus would endorse and be behind is his own party, which is coming in the future and is not here, okay? So any man-made government system or any political party that has ever existed now or before really is not Jesus's party. Jesus' party is coming in the future, and it's the one where every knee is going to bow, and he's going to reign forever.
I think that's what's the problem with Christian nationalism, is that it flattens our eschatology. It's like almost like we're trying to speed up the process, or we're trying to take on the rails of what Christ is going to end up doing eventually. And so to want to enforce something that is not for us to enforce is counter what even his own goal is. When you think about the very fact that God has given us free will, that we can actually reject him, that we can actually live unholy lives, and that he hasn't killed us right away. That should say a lot about our stance on religious liberty. And that should say a lot about how we should not impose certain things on people. But again, we are all agreeing that we shouldn't be necessarily, maybe now a little bit more, like why Christian nationalism would not be a bad thing, or would be a bad thing rather. So if not Christian nationalism, then what?
Then what? So I think the problem has to do with identity and what our identity is based on right now. And so the problem is that we have redefined what Christianity means for America. Yeah. Actually, I have a twofold problem, and we can, we can deep dive into each of them. But number one, I think we have redefined what Christianity means to our culture. Okay, from what it was, it's certainly the word Christianity does not mean today what it meant 100 years ago, and certainly not what it meant 2,000 years ago in the time of Christ. That's problem number one. We've redefined Christianity. And problem number two is we have given birth to the American Pharisee. Okay.
What do you mean by the American Pharisee?
Okay, so what do I mean by the American Pharisee? So the moment that we collectively, as Christians, the moment that we collectively endorse one party versus another, we are claiming the moral high ground.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the moment that you claim the moral high ground,
Wait, what do you mean we're claiming the moral high ground? What do you mean by that?
well, if we collectively endorse one party and we say that this is the right party, this is the Christian party, and this one is not, you're making a moral distinction between them, okay, on Christian terms. And the moment that you make that claim, we open ourselves to scrutiny of every kind of sin that we partake in. The moment you claim the moral high ground, you open up yourself for all kinds of public scrutiny to be analyzed. And we have not done a good job of distinguishing ourselves, separating ourselves from the sin of our party or the party that we might claim collectively.
Okay. But at the same time, it's really difficult to vote for one party or for the other when some of the I don't think we should be one single vote, single issue voters per se. But man, it's really difficult, or rather, it's really easy to not vote for a party that endorses the murder of infants and that endorses this not being able to distinguish between a man and a woman. And those are just the two of the many other things that are like, well, I just couldn't get behind that. Like a party that is so flabbergasted at wanting to continue to push this agenda. I think you're right. I think we shouldn't baptize the other party either. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think that's what happens at times.
Yeah, I think that's where I see the issue. Sorry to cut you off. Is that, and I find myself in this situation since we started doing the podcast, and Mike has been helping me view the world from a biblical lens. I started noticing more how Christian Republicans will see Donald Trump and they would put him as like the Messiah, like, oh, he's here to solve all the problems. And even within the church, like things that before, like with the whole situation with Charlie Kirk happened, I was so upset that more churches were not pointing that out. And it was not so till recently that you and I were talking and I said, like, I understand why churches might not have wanted to make like Charlie Kirk the center of a Sunday sermon, because Sunday sermon is for Christ, it's not for Charlie. Now, I also have these traveling questions in my mind, or traveling thoughts in my mind, that it's like, okay, but what is the line? Because we have to stand up for certain for values. We have, like, even though what Mike was saying is true, like the perfect world is only coming when Christ returns. We also have a responsibility. We also have a dominion over this world. We are the hands and feet of Jesus. So I believe that we also have that responsibility to kind of like spread these values towards the rest of the world, the rest of society. So that's kind of like the part where I'm struggling myself, and I'm excited for today's conversation, because I think that I have two people that have maybe not very opposite, but you guys definitely do not agree on every single basis of this topic.
Well, I don't even think that we don't agree. I just think that we agree, but from different perspectives.
Okay.
So, which is something that you said to me. It's like your point of view is different than my point of view, but we're arriving at the same conclusion that we shouldn't have Christian nationalism. One of the things that we've done is we've actually critiqued James Talarico. And have you looked into James Talarico since? Have you looked into James Talarico? If you're watching this, maybe leave a comment as well. But
okay, can I segue into that?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were talking about the different types of values, right? Like the one value voter, right? The one issue voter. You're talking about abortion, I'm assuming, or one party seems to be in favor of some sins and the other one, is against them. So what happens with this kind of conversation, and it can be frustrating for the viewers or for myself, is that it becomes a lot of whataboutisms, right? Mm-hmm. Because then you start making a list of like, okay, so the right to life, that's a clear one, on the Christian column. And then we have, LGBTQ or other issues that we might not stand for. But then, then you get like issues like poverty or healthcare. Like, you can't be reading the Bible and not tell me that Jesus doesn't care about poverty. It's all over the book of Luke. And healthcare, the immigrants. So there are issues on both sides that we can stand on. But what happens is that we start making a list, and we start giving more weight to one list than the other. And then we start asking ourselves questions like, well, to take care of the poor, then we got to pay taxes, and I don't like paying taxes. So let's put that on this column, and it becomes some preferences start getting mixed in, and you don't really have any clean list anymore. Okay. And again, what happens is one party panders. One party panders to the Christian vote. They want you to vote one way, and the other one doesn't care, or sometimes they pander to like an anti-Christian vote sometimes. So we end up, as a collective whole, we end up endorsing one of these two parties.
Well, but I do know a lot of Christians that would, easily vote Democrat, and easily vote for James Talarico and anyone else in their that's in that side. I think that there's also a danger with people like James Talarico.
Okay, so what I was going to say about him is that when we make lists, there's one there. We love to make lists of sins. Okay, like Christians, we're famous for doing this. And once we make the list, we like to even highlight one of the sins or two of the sins as higher on the spectrum than others, and we like to point the finger at that. But really, what Jesus, I'll tell you the one sin that Jesus consistently brings up more than any other sin, and that's the sin of hypocrisy. Okay, it's unquestionable. The sin that he brings up the most when he's talking to the Pharisees in his confrontations is the sin of hypocrisy. And back to Talarico, what I like about Talarico, and this is something that you and I might agree on, is that he's a lonely voice on the left, okay, where he is claiming his Christianity as part of his platform. Okay? A lot of people on the left don't do that. They might be Christians silently or whatever, but he's making his Christianity kind of like front and center to his platform. And he is a voice which I think agrees with mine, at least at this time, in which he's pointing the finger at the hypocrisy. He's pointing the finger at the Republican Party, and he's saying, you know what? Christian nationalism is not Christianity. And so any voice that is saying that, I'm in favor of. Okay, so whether that's on the right or the left.
But even if the things that he says are not biblically based?
Give me an example.
When he said, when the video that we play on the podcast about taxes, and I don't know if we can pull it out on after, but he says like we shouldn't. What did he say exactly about taxes? That I cut it off and said like, well, he missed clearly what Jesus said. To give to Caesars what is to Caesars, and to give to God what is to God.
What would he say of a government that hold up? What would Jesus say about a government who actually focuses on helping the rich but misses helping those who are poor, like a single mom wanting to be in having to go and rely on GoFundMe accounts to pay for their medical bills? That was one of the points that he made. That's a great observation of him, to be able to look at, I guess there's not just, I guess there's a real dichotomy going on in here. There's a real issue going on in here in which, yes, these issues are happening.
Also, another thing too, now that you said that I'm thinking about, is the Bible ask Christians to take care of the poor. It doesn't call the government to take care of the poor.
True.
I don't think that government should, if you ask my opinion personally, I don't think that the government does a good job with taxes at all. I don't think that taxes are even a tool to help the poor, but that's another conversation. But bringing it back to the thing is like, he's using Christian lingo to appeal to an audience that what we are seeing, and you said something at the beginning of the conversation, of the Christianity state in America. I think that the reason he's able to get away with everything that he's saying is because Christianity in America is very
fragmented. You think?
Fragmented or very, very base, like very over the top. There's not many people actually studying and living by the word. Like most people, they go to church and they play Christianity on the weekends, and then they are like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, this and that. And I think that that's a bigger issue, than.
Well, I think that the problem with Talarico goes beyond that. I think his problem is that I don't think he holds to the Christian worldview. I think that he holds to some of the Christian patterns that you can find from within the Christian worldview. But I don't consider what he preaches to be Christianity. He says things like trans women deserve to have abortions as well. That's one of his things. He's leading in a service that is affirming. And so I think that when you're getting into that side, Alex, I think that you've painted a picture of Jesus that isn't the Jesus that has been revealed to us, like the Jesus. Like if I define you as a person, as a man with long hair and no beard, but you're Alex Fagundo and you have a studio or rather you have a dojo and you have a school and all that, I can define all these things. But if I get those details wrong about you, I'm no longer talking about you. And so I don't think that is something to ignore. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. He does impose a lot of things that I think do belong to the church. And when you involve taxes to try to help the poor, like Iggy was saying, what you end up doing is you are actually out of coercion. I mean, you just look at the fraud, bro. I mean, like at the end of the day, that's what's going to end up happening regardless. I mean, you have left and right fraud happening. You have this guy named Nick Shirley.
Not left and right, by the way. And this is another part.
No, what do you mean not left and right? Fraud is happening across the board.
Yeah, but like democratic states are in the billions of fraud.
Well, fraud is happening here too. I think that I want to stay away from the what was it that you said?
Whataboutisms?
Whataboutisms. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. That's why I can't get behind his, just alone on his stance in Christ and what it means to be a Christian. And like just red flag through and through. And it's just false Christianity. What he preaches is false Christianity.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that, tell me if I'm right. So what I hear you saying is that you can't get behind James Talarico because he has political views that he mixes with his Christian views. He claims to be a Christian, but based on some of his biblical language or his definitions of things, you feel that he doesn't have license to speak as a Christian, because you're judging his Christianity based on things that he has said, statements he has made, and so you're taking away his license to speak as a Christian is what you're doing. However, the problem is that we're not doing that on the right side.
Yeah,
okay?
I agree with you 100% on that.
And again, I want to go back to hypocrisy, okay? Yeah. Because the sin that Jesus brought up over and over again was a sin of hypocrisy.
I 100% can get behind that.
So if we don't call that out on the right-hand side, then we have lost the license to call James Talarico anything. Because if we won't define Christians or non-Christians in our own party...
Yeah, I agree with that.
But let me what I mean with the danger of James Talarico isn't on the political side. What I'm concerned with James Talarico is on the theological side.
Yeah, I get you.
Because more and more Christians who are tired of the hypocrisy of the right are now looking at James Talarico and they're adopting that as their Christianity. That's what I see as the danger of James Talarico. That he is now in this platform, and again, now don't forget what he was saying was true, that many Christians today don't know what they don't know because they're falling away out of lack of knowledge.
Yes.
And so as a result, what ends up happening is they'll attach to someone who is speaking against hypocrisy while not actually holding every thought captive onto the obedience to Christ. Does that make sense?
100%.
So I don't think that a pastor should ever say, you should vote for X guy or Y guy. I don't think that any pastor should ever do that.
Agreed.
I think that no pastor should ever hold a Trump flag or, this or that. Why? Because you got to get behind every flaw that the person said.
And while you were talking, I was thinking about that. Like till this day, I remember even myself, like I did this, so I'm not going to point fingers to anybody, but I did this that at the time of the election, it was Trump. And even Trump being the savvy salesman and marketer that he is, he came up with his own Bible, the Bible Trump. And then you had all these Christians, and I had even family members that they know that I'm a Christian. They are not Christians, but they know that I'm a Christian, and they were like, "Oh, you're voting for Trump, right? Look, he's coming up with the Bible. He's this and that." And I can look back now and see your point that you were making at the beginning of the episode, that is like hypocrisy is the biggest sin, and we have to be able to call out both sides, right? But after you call out both sides, how does it look applying your Christianity to your politics view?
Okay, so a few minutes ago, you were talking about the Christian who is like in name only. I think you use different words, but we're talking about people who are nominal Christians. And how many of those people do you think there are?
More than
the statistic is that 96% of Christians are nominal Christians.
Okay,
maybe even 97% of Christians.
Can we find out
that numerous books have been written on this? Barna has released these in the past.
Perfect.
Yes,
that's scary, by the way.
Yeah. I've seen some of those statistics. I know what you're talking about, Mike. Okay, so yes, exactly that, right? And so even biblically, Jesus himself, right? He says, not everybody who says Lord, Lord is going to enter the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus himself is letting us know that there is a good number of people who identify as his followers who don't really know him. He's going to tell them at the last day, he's going to be like, depart from me, I never knew you. So not only do the statistics prove it, but Jesus himself tells us that this is an actual problem where a lot of people have a false identity where they believe that they're Christians, but really their identity is in a Christian subculture and not in Christ.
And that's important to understand the difference between the two, because if you make your identity that subculture, then it's very easy to root for your team.
Exactly.
And so then you make it about the team.
This is actually more concerning than what I thought it was, actually, because this is not only brings concern to us Christians, but it also brings concern to like the church,
100%. I think it's the biggest problem in the church today.
That's like the claim that you need to repeat.
Yeah.
I don't know that if I can get behind that statement that is the biggest problem that the church has today.
I mean, bro,
100%.
like I want to push back to you now. Like,
sure,
if we are saying that 96% of Christians are not actually Christians, why are we wasting so much time in evangelism? Why are we wasting so much time in hold on, let me rephrase this. Why are we wasting so much time in American evangelism? Why are we wasting so much time in filling up churches when we should be actually focusing on real evangelism? We should be focusing on real evangelism through discipleship. We should be teaching people what it means to follow Christ and not telling people, oh, come to church and repent and you will be set free from your life as a sinner. Because
the reason why I say that is not the biggest problem is because sooner or later, another problem of the same issue comes. I think that Christian nationalism is probably one of the biggest symptoms of the real problem going on within the church. And that is that my people don't know me, and so, we don't know our God, and so 96%, again, Barna Group, you can look it up yourself. Statistically speaking, they don't even know like what they know. And so I think Christian nationalism is the thing now, but it's not just that. It's the Talarico effect. It's sentimentality over holiness.
Talarico is not the problem.
No, bro.
Talarico is part of the answer.
I hope that he's not part of the answer, bro.
How is part of the answer? How is part of the answer?
Yeah.
Talarico is part of the answer because of what I said. Because he is another voice pointing the finger at the hypocrisy, and he's letting culture know that is not true Christianity. And that's the problem. The problem is that we have rebranded what Christianity is in the eyes of society to mean something that it's not. So any voice, whether it's Talarico or anybody else's.
So you're not even behind Talarico. You're just behind the message that he's saying regarding the hypocrisy.
Yes. And because what we need to do is create unity around Christ and not around Christian subculture, which is what we have right now. So what Iggy was just saying a second ago, you define the problem beautifully. So the problem is that we have to evangelize the people who think that they're Christians.
Yeah,
that's the most. That's
why
the most difficult part.
By the way, that's why every single Sunday hopefully this happens in your church, the pastor will actually give them the opportunity to respond to the message of the gospel.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's part of evangelism either.
Regardless of whether or not that's part of evangelism, that's one of the reasons why they do that, because we are always assuming that the people that are in the room aren't necessarily following Christ.
We never graduate from the gospel.
No,
right?
definitely. We need the gospel every day.
And so those nominal Christians who they've heard the gospel thousands and thousands of times, but somehow it hasn't penetrated their heart. It hasn't changed their character. It hasn't changed who they are. And so that's why we have to evangelize. We have to give the gospel to those people.
So the part that I can get behind with him is that Talarico is not the problem. Now, why I said that? Because I believe that the problem is...
Newsflash.
No, I believe that the problem is it's further above Talarico. I think that the problem is actually church leadership, like
I think that
pastoral leadership.
I guess he's pointing the problem on us. But
let me give you something to think about, something to chew on, okay?
okay.
So as Christians, I think the three of us, I think we tend to look at the world, and we're doing it right now, into two camps: those who know Christ and those who don't know Christ. Okay, we who are Christians, we tend to do that a lot. But those who are not Christians, the average atheist on the street, they divide the world a different way into those who claim to be Christians and those who don't. And as we just said, the number of people who claim to be Christians is a massive number, okay? And it's really Christian subculture. So for the average atheist, or for culture, what they think Christianity is the subculture. But that is the false identity. That is not true Christianity. And we have allowed that to continue because we don't separate from it.
Okay. Well, now, here's the thing. So I think the error is obvious that we are having to choose between political idolatry and, I guess, what is it, political silence? Is it like not having a voice onto what we know is right and like voting rightly? Or because you're right. I mean, any time that I speak with someone who's a non-believer, they're going to view the reason why they can't become Christians is because they'll point out the hypocrisy among Christians. Oh, I can't do that. When I was growing up, I saw this happen. That's really what happens. That's usually a stumbling block. We're seen in that lens. But at the end of the day, Alex, don't we as followers of Jesus, because this is the reality of the situation. As followers of Jesus, we're trying to figure out what can we do. Okay, I don't want to be a Christian nationalist, but I also don't want to be silent over what I know is right and wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the application to this, right? Because we can sit down and debate all day long and go back and forth. And I think that we can find points of agreement.
Well, I think we're agreeing.
Yeah,
I haven't disagreed.
Except on Talarico being the voice.
No, I agree with you saying that the message that he's saying, pointing the hypocrisy, I agree 100%. Like that is part
But how
of...
can you point hypocrisy when you are hypocritical at the same time?
Right? Well, I mean, sometimes God can use a donkey to even point out something, you know, so...
Okay. But
a donkey! Look at that! Party. I was thinking about Balaam and the donkey in Numbers.
But outside of that, like what are practical ways to get to that place? Because I assume that even though you have this position, you also at times deal with this issue. You know, like your own convictions sometimes might get in the way of how you view politics and how you view like your like life. So how do you? What practical ways can we share for the audience?
Unity around Christ and not unity around Christian subculture. That's the difference. That's the distinction. Okay. So you and I, we are able to distinguish. In fact, Jesus taught us how to distinguish between a nominal Christian and a real Christian. Okay. So Jesus gave us tools for that. He said, by their fruits you would know them, right? So and in fact, we're commanded to do so, I think in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Mike, right? We're told that we can judge other believers. We're not to judge the world, but we are to judge other believers.
We're not just there. You see that in Matthew chapter 6 as well. You know, you see that in all of 1 Corinthians. You see it.
Okay, exactly. So we Christians have tools for making these distinctions between nominal Christians and not, but the world does not have those tools. So the world, they just take things at face value. So if someone lives like hell, but they claim to be a Christian,
Yeah.
they will take that at face value. And then if you and I don't call that out, okay, we have Christian. Okay, let's just say that in one of our two political parties, half the leaders are being accused of the most heinous crimes possible.
Yeah,
okay?
haven't even been found in the Epstein files, you know.
And we're not calling them out. Like that alone, we have lost all moral license.
Yes.
Okay.
We talk about that.
To say anything else.
Yeah.
Like that's it. We've lost it. Like society is not listening anymore. And so again, because we have endorsed one party, we are letting society watching know that our identity is the subculture and not Christ. And that's the problem. We have to fix that.
Yeah,
Okay, but listen. So if you're rejecting Christian nationalism, I still think that doesn't require for us to reject Christian moral witness, right? I think that obviously we have to have a moral witness. We need to be able to stand on what is right and what is true and what is beautiful.
Okay, so it's not that I'm rejecting Christian nationalism. It's the application, okay? Because again, the heart of it is a good heart. It's a good intentions, like what we began at the show. The problem is, what are we unifying around?
Right, you're saying don't be tribalist. Don't go under this subculture. I get that. I'm behind you. I mean, even in my notes and preparation, like that's where I was hoping that we will land. But
do you think that Charlie Kirk was application-wise in the right track?
No, I think he's the poster child of Christian nationalism.
Okay.
So I like some of the things that Charlie Kirk said. So again, what Charlie Kirk did a lot is he would argue Christian values from a non-biblical point of view. Back to what I was saying in my definition, right? Like, so he would talk about family values in a way that applies to all of society, and if all of society follows these values, then it's good for the whole. So he was very good at making those cases. However, at what cost? Because when you follow that logic all the way through, you end up with what I said at the beginning. It's the birth of the American Pharisee. Okay, so let's say that we succeed. Let's say that we succeed at passing every single one of the values that we want through Congress, through House, through Senate, unopposed. And let's say that people are following those values. Is that culture, is that society that we are creating, is that society more Christ-honoring than the one we have today? Because I would say it's not.
Well, if we do it correctly, with Christ at the center, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to deal with the issue of sin, right? So
let me ask you: can you legislate heart change?
No, that's where I was going to. Like at the end of the day, the issue, the issue at hand is sin. So the reason I'm making that claim is because the answer to your question is no. But I would say that if we do it in a right way, we will have more people coming to Christ.
I don't think so. I think you end up with a Pharisaical system where you turn people away from. You actually do the opposite, okay? Because if you are able to implement all of these laws and people follow them, what you're doing is you're giving a false gospel. Because what you're saying is that if you follow these values, then you are right with God, and that's the opposite of the gospel.
Okay, but hold on, and I just want to play a little bit here because I don't think that that's how you build societies. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, a society is built upon something objective that we can say that is right and wrong.
Okay.
And that's why we have certain laws that dictate what is right and what is wrong. Like murder is wrong.
Okay.
Why is it wrong? And so we should legislate that. And so if murder is wrong merely on the premise that murder is wrong because it affects us in one way or another, like for the advancements of society, then why is that bad to not advance as a society? So what I'm saying is that laws are predicated on certain moral objectives, some outside absolutes, and they presuppose God or a deity of some form, and that's ultimately what makes the law the law. And so when you're appealed to rights and you're appealed to certain legislations, you're not doing it for the sake of making it so that people become Christians, but you're simply doing it because it's what is right. And so like, you don't want someone to murder you, right? Hopefully you don't want someone murdering your family, but you would put the law not so that they become Christians. You will put it because it's wrong, right?
Yes.
And so what you definitely want as a follower of Jesus Christ is someone who is going to uphold what is a moral absolute, at least when it comes to implementing certain laws and applying those laws. And I think that when you look at one side of the equation, when it comes to these political parties, right? Although both sides are hypocritical on every aspect of what the word hypocrisy means, one side has completely deluded themselves from reality. And they are saying things like people don't have a right to life. If you want to today in Canada, because you feel sad or depressed or whatever, if you want to end your life, then you have the right to end your life. You know, this whole thing with euthanasia. Mm-hmm. So there's no value to life. We live in a culture of death. In addition to that, we have no idea as to whether we should have men and women's sports or women and men's sports. That to me is normal. And I don't think that enforcing and making the law be the law has anything to do with wanting to force people to be Christian. It has just everything to do with upholding with what is right and what is wrong, because that's what makes a healthy society. So I think, you know, the three building blocks of a healthy society are the family, the church, and the state. Those are the three building blocks of any healthy society. If you try to put it any other way, it doesn't work. And there's a reason for why the family first, what the church does, and where the church's influence starts and ends, and where the state's influence starts and ends. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that what you're saying is entirely accurate either, bro.
I think that the end result always ends up with teaching the commandments of men as if they were the commandments of God. Okay, so I want to give you a biblical example from Mark chapter 7, if I can. So, if you invite me to your house, do you wash your hands before dinner?
Yes.
Okay, let's say what if you invite me to your house and I go to the bathroom and you see me go to the bathroom, but you saw that my hands are dry. I did not wash my hands, and then I'm playing with your dog or your cat, and you saw that your dog is just licking my hands all over, and I'm like, kissing your dog and all that. And then we serve dinner and it's like sandwiches. I'm like holding a sandwich with these like slobbery hands. Is that right?
No.
Okay. And then what happens if you serve me a plate, a bowl, but instead of washing the bowl, you still have the spaghetti from last night, kind of like crusty on there, but you put new food in it today and you serve it to me. Like, these are things that are like common sense, right? Like no one does these things. But that's what's happening in Mark chapter 7. Jesus purposefully, on purpose, does not wash his hands and eats dinner with his disciples just to prove a point. Because then the Pharisees are like, how come your disciples don't wash their hands or they don't wash their dishes before they eat dinner? And Jesus did it to prove the hypocrisy. Because anyone in their right mind, any one of us would agree that it makes total sense to have laws about washing dishes and washing your hands. These are common sense things. Look at prohibition, okay? Like the Bible says don't get drunk on wine, okay? But what is the man-made law? It goes one step further. It's like, let's be safe about it. Let's make it totally illegal. Let's make wine totally legal. That way we avoid the problem. But Jesus didn't say that. Jesus didn't say make wine illegal. He just says don't get drunk on wine. Like, the man-made application always goes a step further, that becomes pharisaical. And what happens is that the people start following it and they believe in their minds and their heart that they're okay with God because they follow this thing and that they don't need the gospel.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, bro. I mean, and I've preached Mark 7 several times, and at the end of the day, what he's saying is not what enters your mouth that defiles you,
right,
but what comes out of your mouth that defiles you.
Right.
Again, pointing to the hypocrisy. But I think you're missing the point here, and I love that we're talking about this.
What am I missing?
So I think that what you're saying, or what you're misinterpreting, is maybe I'm misinterpreting you. Maybe. But it sounds like what you're saying is, well, we shouldn't bring our Christian values to the table when it comes to voting or when it comes to policy. And I don't think that's what you're saying, but it sounds to me like that's what you're saying.
So we're talking again about, like, what should the Christian voice be in the public square? Is that what you're saying?
I think that's probably the most accurate.
So I don't know what the right answer is, but I'll tell you for sure what the right answer is not. The right answer is not unity around anything other than Christ. Okay, which is right now, not what we're doing. Right now, we're presenting a collective identity around something other than Christ. We're uniting under subculture. So that is definitely not the issue. I would also like to point out that our citizenship is not here; our citizenship is in heaven.
Yeah.
Okay.
100% behind that.
So I think that there should be like an internal witness inside every Christian that makes them feel a little bit like a foreigner, no matter where they live.
Oh, 100%. Listen, we are strangers and sojourners in this land. I mean, 1 Peter
Okay.
chapter 2. I agree. Like, we don't identify first with our nation, with our country. We identify first with Christ. We are embracing him. And even our behavior. I think the passage in 1 Peter chapter 2 is like, our behavior must be excellent behavior. Like, we ought to be living holy lives, but holy lives not in the sense that we look as though we're holy like the Pharisees, but holy as in like the whole of us should be reflecting the glory of God in every area of our lives, that we submit ourselves. But this is verse 13. Submitting yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. And I think that's the intricacy about the nation that we live in, is that we don't live under tyranny. We don't live under lords and kings. We elect our leaders. And when we elect our leaders, we can't be silent either. That's the part that we started agreeing 100% on not for Christian nationalism, not promoting a subculture, realizing that there's a problem from the outside looking in, that when people think of Christian, they think the subculture. But at the end of the day, that's the part that I'm not hearing you say. So that's what I'm asking you to bring a little bit more clarity. I'm going to press you on that.
So we shouldn't be silent. The problem is that we're all endorsing one side is the problem. So what I would wish is that every Christian would be 50-50, and they would be able to point at the good values that are in the left and the good values that are on the right, and that they would be able to call out the sin of the right and the left equally. So if we would do that equal measure, I'd be all in favor of every Christian voicing their opinion.
Okay, I'll call
out. The
out.
problem is that every Christian is voicing just one thing, which is not Christ.
Okay, I agree to an extent. I'm confused on one area that I need clarification, because what I'm hearing is that we ought not to be hypocritical, okay, which we agree. But at the same time, I'm finding myself now in this crossroad where it's like, okay, if I don't want to be hypocritical because I'm a sinner, if I don't want to be hypocritical, then I have to keep my mouth shut.
No.
But based on what you are defining about hypocrisy, that's the only solution for me not to be hypocritical, because I can't stand in favor of a party that will want to tell my child that if he wants to be a girl tomorrow, he can. Mm-hmm. So now, if I don't want to be hypocritical because I'm a sinner, I can point out to the Democrats and be like, you guys are evil, because basically what I'm saying by saying that, I'm being hypocritical because I know that I am evil too, because that's my condition. So that's where it's hard. And I believe that this is the reason why Christianity is losing. This is the reason why Christianity is falling apart, outside of the things that we discussed before, because again, I don't want to make this the center of but this is the reason why we have other ideologies that are dangerous coming in and destroying the family, destroying the government, and destroying the church.
So you just said something really good. So, which I believe is part of the answer. Okay, you showed humility. You started talking about your own sin. Okay, and I think the church could do a little bit more of that. All right. So we make a list of sins and we like to highlight one over the other, but we have to remember that we're sinners ourselves, right? So I really don't like it when people point one sin more than the other, because in that whole list of sins, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them are mine. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so the moment that I start making one of those higher than the ones that I'm guilty of, that's a problem. And so the church needs to show a little bit of humility, like you just did, and acknowledging our own sin. And that goes a long way. Another thing I was going to say it's just, man,
Well, as you're thinking
I'd like
about
that,
that, as you're thinking about that, I agree. We should definitely acknowledge our own sin. I do think that at the same time, the part of the application is still a little bit kind of off because.
I know what I was going to say.
Oh, go for it. Say it.
Okay. So I was going to actually push back on you and ask you a question, okay?
Sure.
Because I think that you have, so I have a strong opinion clearly as to what the voice should be, but I think you have a very strong opinion, which is different. I want to ask you, what should be the Christian voice in the public square? And tell me about the danger of entitlement. Because if there's one thing that a Christian should not be, is entitled. Okay? Like when we look at the fruits of the Spirit, being entitled is not one of them. So show me how to do that. Show me how to like tell society why we should do this, that, or the other in a way that doesn't feel like you're telling non-believers, this culture is mine and not yours. Tell me how to do that.
I can't do that in a soundbite, but I can definitely do my best to help you see what a loaded question. Well, first you have to be a person who lives by conviction, humility, as you were mentioning. You have to be wise. You have to have courage to stand up for what is right. Call out the evils. Call out evil, evil, and good, good. I think that it's difficult to apply in a broad stroke that sentiment that you're expressing. Like, how do you do that? But for the way that I see it is, even as I'm going out to vote, because this is the thought that I'm seeing, like, why this over that? Well, because as much as I love being able to help those who are in need, as much as I love helping those who are in critical situations, I also don't want to see people be murdered in the most vulnerable way possible. Okay? I don't want to see abortion be something that our culture continues to promote. And it's evil. And we can get behind why that's evil. But I think anyone can agree murder is evil. And I think that if that were not one of the main issues within the left, probably that would be an easier vote to go to the left. Because there are some things that the left does very well that the right just doesn't do well. I think another issue might be the issue between not pandering to a small community to want to make everyone agree that I can have 20,000 different pronouns depending on my mood. So I think that when I'm able to see what is right and when I'm being able to say what is wrong, if I'm able to see it on both sides, you know what? I don't like that this party does this. I don't like that this party does that either. But I can tell you what, I could definitely never get behind that. And so that's the point. For me, it makes it very easy to say one over the other. And I'm not telling anyone how to vote. I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm not telling you as a follower of Jesus who to vote for. I can't get behind. Listen, I disagree with Trump's position on abortion. I disagree with Trump's pandering over putting the Constitution and the Bible. Like, he's playing games with Christians and people are believing that they're Christian that he's a Christian because he says Christian things. I mean, this is back in the 2016 run that he had when he went over into Liberty University and he said, 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians. I was thinking exactly the same thing. 2 Corinthians.
So it's like, bro, tell me you don't read the Bible without telling me you don't read the Bible. And then you got James Talarico, who actually definitely reads his Bible, but interprets it in an entirely different way. And so for me, I think that it's less about vote for this one because this one's Christian and the other one isn't. I think it's more, when you're going out into the public square, you need to be able to call out the hypocrisy, period. Call it what it is. But at the end of the day, as a civilian, you have a duty to cast a vote. As a civilian, you have a duty to stand up for what is right. And where you base what is right doesn't come from how I feel. It comes from who God is. And God calls many things wicked and evil, just like hypocrisy. And he calls out wicked and evil to abuse children. And I'm talking about the right and the people who got away with it. I'm talking about allegedly Matt Gaetz, right? He was actually charged. Was he not charged with?
I don't know.
I don't know.
This Republican guy, he was charged with child trafficking from one state to the other for his own pleasure, allegedly. I'm going to use that word so we don't get sued by them, by that person. But so we as Christians, I believe, we don't worship a political power. I think we should never do that. I think we should also not hide our Christian convictions of what is true, okay? Of what justice is, of what moral responsibility is. And when I look at, and I just have this really long thing that you just gave me. So Johnny, I'm sorry, bro. Johnny's our producer. He always says I talk too much. But when we look at the application of this, I'm not looking at it from a moral high ground as in you ought to submit to what I believe in my Christ and my like my Bible. No, I can argue it like the way Charlie Kirk would, as you rightly pointed out. Even without the Bible, I can point to the principle because the principle comes from who? From God.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a moral obligation as followers of Jesus to stand up for what is true and what is right. How can we get behind the opposite?
Okay, so I think as Christians, many Christians, they look at the Old Testament Israel and they try to bring a lot of that into modern day America, probably because they're casual readers of the Bible and because they're more informed by the Christian subculture than they are by God's word. And so there's things that are just in the Christian subculture, like just there, and that's what informs their mind and their politics. And so a lot of that has this view of America as a new Israel.
Yeah, that's manifest destiny, right?
Yeah. So
I was going to ask you if you can define that, because I do believe that there's a lot of things that we can get from the Old Testament, not that one in particular. So can you clarify what you mean by, you were going to that point that people see the U.S. as the new Israel?
A lot of them do, even if they don't say those words.
Okay.
They're importing Old Testament values that were meant to be in a theocratic government, right, under the times of David or Solomon, and they're applying them. They're bringing them forward 3,000 years to today, and so when you read the Bible and you really like study it, you see that there's many different Israels. Okay, there's at least 5 or 6 different Israels. There's Israel during the kingdom time. There's Israel during the exile time. There's Israel post-exile. There's Israel when Jesus comes. And each one of those is a different Israel. And in our church, we like to teach people that you have to always pay attention to who is the original audience.
Yeah.
Okay, because what you cannot do
is put yourself in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You cannot apply the Bible straight to yourself and ignore the original audience, because that's a guarantee that you're going to be misapplying it. And so I believe that if you want to study Israel, the closest thing that we can like look at maybe for information is Israel during the time of exile. Okay? Because they are away from their homeland, being forced to live in a pagan land, okay, under Nebuchadnezzar, under Persia,
and Artaxerxes, etc.
Yeah, in Babylon, where the laws of that land are not Christian at all. The laws of that land are total pagan laws, but Israel is forced to live there. And what does God tell them to do in Jeremiah 31? He tells them, seek out the best of the land. Seek out the best for your neighbors. Get married. Have families in this land. And do what's best for these people. Okay? But they still have to observe a government that is not representative of their values. And it's, in many ways, it's against their values.
No, but that's what I'm saying. And which is what I was highlighting earlier, is that we don't get a Lord or a king that's entrusted upon us that we ought to submit ourselves to. We actually also have a voice that we actually end up casting a vote into, which is a very different setting. So that's the heart of the difficulty of this application is, again,
can we take it to a practical way?
Yeah.
Like right now we have this whole situation with immigration, Muslims happening in America right now. How, based on what we're discussing right now, okay, a Christian nationalist would say like, let's kick out all the Muslims.
Which I think it would be horrible.
Yeah, no, I'm just presenting the position. Let's kick out all the Muslims. Let's fill in the blank, because I've heard crazy stuff online, and let's bring America back to Christianity and let's make it a Christian nation. But then on the other side, you have people that it's like inclusion and no, let's them come in and let's them do this. And then we have examples such as what is going on in the UK, where you share with me what's going on in Barcelona, how these other religions are taking over and they are actually changing everything. So what would be an approach as a Christian, not as a Christian nationalist, but as a Christian, to approach the whole situation that we're living currently in America?
Okay, so what you're describing comes from a place of fear.
Okay.
It comes from a place of fear that we're losing our culture. A lot of it has to do with preferences. You know, I like our country a certain way, and we're beginning to lose it. And it's true. That fear is absolutely real, 100%. We are losing the culture because it's changing every day. Okay. Now the question is, are we able to hold it? And the answer is no. Okay. That protection sentimentality of can we hold on to how it was? The answer is no, you can't. So number one, I would argue that how it was not that great. Okay. Because a lot of times they don't point out all the sins of the past either.
All the hypocrisy.
Okay, and we look at the past with like these rosy glasses, you know, when there was like civil rights issues going on, slavery going on, and no one says anything about that. So America was not all that Christian as we might think it was. But even if it was, can you hold on to a culture and keep it from changing? The answer is no, you can't. Okay, you cannot keep it from changing. And if you try, what ends up happening is what I was saying is that sense of entitlement. What the statement that you're saying without saying it is this country belongs to me, but not to you. Okay. And the culture is watching and they're hearing that loud and clear. And they're hearing it from the Christian subculture, which they are not able to distinguish like you and I, who are the real Christians and who are not the real Christians. So when we do not distinguish ourselves, what they hear is Christians hate me. Or Christians believe that this country belongs to them, but not to me. And that makes the whole environment a poison ground to sow the gospel.
Yeah. So I'm gonna back you up over here, bro. I think that we do spend a lot of time on social media talking about what political candidate, look at this guy, look at what he did, look at what he said, look at all. Like we spend so much time trying to endorse or not endorse. So what would be the opposite of not endorsing? Denying, tearing down, whatever, refuting, that we actually don't preach the gospel and we don't make disciples. But we have so much of the little rectangle and the little algorithm is shaping us in such a way that we forget what our main role is here as followers of Jesus Christ, which is, as we live for his glory, we ought to be making disciples. So I think we need to be refusing the cable, and news related, like our gut to want to go and combat against Muslims coming in. And if a Muslim were to come into my neighborhood, which I would not want Islam to be something that's propagated in my community, like I just would not want that. As a follower of Jesus, that's not something that I desire. But they have the legal right to do that. And so I can't oppose that either. Like I cannot, I should not. I would not. And the best I can do is, they're opening a mosque over there. Well, guess what? Now I have a whole new mission field of people who I got to preach the gospel to.
It will kill you, bro.
So even if they kill me, even if that's the end, I mean, aren't disciples intended to die? Aren't we intended to be witnesses? Even if it means carrying a cross, aren't we to carry our cross daily? So even if all the things change around us, even if everything around us is taking a whole different shape, we are called to be witnesses, right? And so as a witness, my first thing is to go towards them because I know they're lost. But if I'm going at it with, you're not welcome here, like what you're saying is true. People are just going to look at the Christian and say, well, why you're right and not they're right? And look, they're not trying to do anything bad. They're just trying to practice their own, because they also don't understand the dangers of any of the other worldviews either.
I think we need to separate between our preferences and what's good for the gospel. Okay.
I like that. I can go behind that.
Let me ask you this. So Iggy, that fear that you're bringing up, which I don't know if that's your own or you're presenting a case that you've heard. But that fear, that valid fear that the culture is changing, if it did change, and it's going to change. So if culture changed even more than now, it became more pluralistic, less Christian, and it went like exactly like you said, like Barcelona, like the UK, or even beyond that, would that create an environment where the soil is better for the gospel or worse? Because I would say that it's better.
Look, it is definitely better. I think that I'm trying to think from a practical way, right? And what I'm getting from this conversation. So clearly I get that as a Christian nationalism is definitely not the answer. I can get behind that. I can agree with that. I think that anything except for Christ that is an extreme is bad. Did I say that right? Okay, perfect. So I can definitely get behind that. Now, where I'm finding a hard time, and again, I'm processing my thoughts as we go, is what is the practical application of this? Because I find 2 or 3 answers to that answer. Answer number 1, I stay quiet and I just live my life and I stay surrounded in my little Christian bubble. Okay? Trusting and believing what the word says, that Christ is returning and that there's nothing that I should fear or worry about. Let me leave everything to him and I just continue with my day to day, which I believe is dangerous because in doing that, I can get desensitized with the reality of what is going on, and I can become a self-centered person. Point number 2 is get a little bit more vocal, get a little bit more into like Charlie Kirk mode without getting to the extreme of, what we define Christian nationalism is. And the third part is what you just was saying, the soil is better for the gospel and everything. But I think going back to the church, and I don't want to sound like I'm hitting on the church, but I think that if there's the right tools presenting to the sheep,
Yeah.
It's hard to actually harvest that soil, like to actually plow the soil.
I would like to give Alex the last word. So can I say something? So then you can have the last word on this one.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that we need to, in the case of Islam, we need to tell the truth about Islam, but we have to do it without hatred. So when we teach Islam, when we teach what it is, we have to remember that we're talking about people who believe something, who need the gospel just as much as we do. I think that we need to be able to distinguish between neighborly love and theological surrender. So we know what is true, what is right, what is beautiful. We know we trust Christ. We love our neighbor as ourselves. And by the way, that means that we can treat those who oppose our view with dignity, with fairness, with respect, because they're made in the image of God just as much as we are. I think that we also support a rule of law without any kind of ethnic or religious panic. Right? I have to keep Christianity as a nation. No, as you were saying, the U.S. has never been, quote unquote, a Christian nation, though it might have had perhaps the fruit of Christian values per se, but not necessarily in it inherently being Christian. I think we, as followers of Jesus, we need to recover Christian courage and the courage to actually share the gospel and going out there, not being afraid of being told to get out of here. I think that we need to, if you look at mosques, churches are being sold because they don't have people, and mosques are being built on them. And so we need to consider not, are they making an advance on Christians? No. Why is it that Christians are retreating? Why is it that churches are dying? It might be because of that whole nominal Christianity. So we need to rebuild the church. We need to actually teach followers of Jesus what it means to follow Jesus, and we need to evangelize. I mean, gosh, I said it 3 or 4 times already. We need to evangelize. We need to make disciples.
Yeah, but I want to bring him back again.
I know.
If you can, because I would love to get your point of view on the church nowadays, because a lot of the discussion of today, that it was Christian nationalism, and I can see why you think is probably the biggest issue, or one of the biggest issues. I think that the root of that has to do with discipleship. It has to do with what true evangelism is, And I think that there's this misconception. As a young believer, I'm going to say, because this is what I see in the church in America, at least, that evangelism, it's an event, and the way this conversation and scripture is showing me that scripture actually is, that evangelism actually is that evangelism is not an event, it's a daily pouring into the sheep. You know, I did not become a Christian the day I raised up my hand, you know? And I think that that's the conception in America, that you become a Christian the moment that you raise up your hand. That's why I don't personally agree on making an altar call. Like, I did not become a Christian.
I'm with you.
Day.
I'm with you 100%.
So I want your final thoughts on these, but I would love for you to come back.
Well, yeah, I probably have too much to say, but okay, so I'll just tell you that most of the New Testament letters were written to correct church error, okay? So all of these churches were planted by Paul, by John, by James, by Peter, okay? And I would say that a good portion of the New Testament letters, they're correcting errors that were already infiltrating the church. And this is one of those. I believe that Paul would be writing this letter today. It would be to the church in America. And it would begin with, grace and peace from Paul to the church in America. I know that you are zealous for your nation, but blah, 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 blah. I believe...
You have abandoned your first love.
Yes, you have abandoned your first love, exactly, and you have made this other love equal to Christ, and people can't even tell you apart. People cannot even discern like what you believe, because you've allowed them to create this false identity that you will not separate from. So to answer your question about like practical, I don't know if I'm gonna muddy it more for you, Iggy, but this is what I found for myself. What is my answer to be practical is to disassociate from hypocrites. I don't know if that does it for you, but because I believe that that's the biggest problem, that's where I'm at. So if we had Christians voting 2 ways equally, then I think we could do what Mike is saying. I think that then we could have a Christian voice where Christians on both sides would be like this, these values are good and these hypocrisies are bad. Then we could do what Mike is saying. But because that's not what's happening, because we have a one issue voting scenario, I believe that the problem and the only solution right now is to disassociate them yourself.
But should we vote?
Yeah, of course. You need to vote with conviction for whatever value on the left or the right you feel passionate about. But my voice publicly is going to be to unity on Christ, and which unity on Christ is always divisive.
I understand that.
It's always divisive, because when you unite around Christ, it means you are disuniting or separating around something else.
I understand now. So what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, so we can maybe clarify this also for the audience, is don't pick a side on the public square.
No.
Be honest, be objective with both sides on the public square.
Yes.
100%.
At the time of voting, choose according to your convictions.
Yes.
I can get behind that.
That's exactly right.
I can get behind that, and I think that that's reasonable, and I think that is like if we get to that point, I think that's the best testimony that we can put forward to the world that's watching. That's my opinion. Yeah, I agree.
That's a good testimony.
Yeah, that's a good testimony.
That's a good testimony. That's always the goal too. Whenever we are trying to help those who are following Christ, well, how do I think about these matters? Like, if you start with a party, you started the wrong way.
Yes.
So, thank you so much for being here with us, Alex. Thank you for shedding light onto and with so much passion about this too, bro.
Thank you.
I'd love to have you back again, and hopefully you can come back. If you watch this and you watch it all the way through, please share it with someone. I'm sure there's at least 2 people you can think about that you should be sharing this with, and make sure you leave a like and subscribe.